Hey, what is up, everybody? I'm Michael Woods, founder of Inclusive Sport Design, and welcome to the Sport is for Everybody podcast, where we talk all things inclusion in sport with amazing guests who are out there making it happen. We are recording on beautiful Gundungurra country, and I'd like to acknowledge and thank the Gundungurra people and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I also pay my respects and welcome all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and all other Indigenous and First Nations peoples who are watching or listening in today. In this episode, I talk with Shayne Elise, Palestinian-Irish-American former Grand Prix dressage rider and the founder of athlete management agency 3XV Sports. Shayne began her career as a fully sponsored athlete, earning USDF bronze, silver, and gold medals by the age of 25 while training under Olympic-level competitors. That experience gave her first-hand insight into elite performance, sponsorship dynamics, and athlete identity. Navigating sponsorship, media, and representation as a Palestinian athlete exposed Shayne to structural blind spots and inequities within global sport. And what began as negotiating her own image rights and partnerships and long-term career strategy soon evolved into other athletes seeking her guidance, forming the foundation of 3XV's athlete-first investment-driven model. Today, Shayne operates at the intersection of sport, culture, talent, and capital, building systems that invest in athletes as long-term assets. Her work positions athletes not only as competitors, but as intellectual property holders, cultural voices, and long-term stakeholders in the global sports economy. Now, this episode was a wonderful experience for me as I got to talk about an area of the sport industry that I'm not that familiar with someone who is really pushing the boundaries in an area of sport that so often puts brands before authentic athlete identity. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Let's get into it. Shayne Elise, welcome to the Sport is for Everybody podcast. It's really exciting to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No problem. Let's jump straight into things. Let's talk about how you got into sport. What's your sporting background? How did that journey start for you?
So I rode through Grand Prix dressage horses, but besides that, I also had dabbled in a lot of other sports. So I was sprinting, I did lacrosse, I did soccer, as they say out here in the States. I did everything. I would say I was a jack of all trades, but horses were where my heart was at. And at one point, I did pick between track and horses, and I was always good at it, and it was the discipline that it instilled and the connection with an animal. I loved it. That was like, I felt such a strong passion for that discipline that, being there day in, day out. And I didn't even know I could really make a career of it. I wanted it to be, I had this Olympic dream, but I never really thought of it as a career until I was in my late teens. And then I started to recognize like I was getting a lot of opportunity. I had started to get some small sponsorships, and I was like, I think maybe this can be my thing. Yeah. So, yeah, sports background.
I always find the equestrian sphere of sport really interesting because it's not just about your athletic performance and your training and what you do in the competition. You've also got this animal, this horse that is equally as important in some respects, maybe more important. And you've got that sort of athletic performance to consider for the animal as well. And it's not something that I've ever had any exposure to at all. And so I wonder, like, what's that experience like working on your own athletic performance, but also making sure that your horse is also, I guess, there doing what it needs to do, and you're looking after the animal, you're training the animal as well as yourself. What's that like?
I think of it as no different from looking at your teammates. I think that was always the biggest thing was, okay, this is my teammate. So we're training together. I'm training on my own. I'm focused on his or her, nutrition and performance and this and that. I think it wasn't until I got a little bit older and I was really focused on Grand Prix at that time, and I had a really good coach at the time, that I started to see like another level of, okay, there's like the psychology aspect of myself as a rider, but also the psychology of the animal. And I already had that as a kid. that connection with the horse and just that natural feeling, but it was something different. Okay, there's a specific style of training that really works for this horse. And now there's a specific style of training that works for other horses, other teammates, essentially. And I think that the emotional intelligence that comes with working with animals is you can't replicate that anywhere. But it's part of what makes me really good at what I do now with working with people and working with athletes, specifically athletes from underrepresented backgrounds. I think that connection that you're building, it's that, it's a softness. It's really giving room to allow someone to show their strengths and shine. And I think that was the beauty about that sport, because there are so many technicalities. And if I'm comparing dressage to even other equestrian sports, I don't know that the rider themselves has the same, they don't need the same athletic capabilities as a show jumper or as a jockey in horse racing. And then when you're looking at equestrian sport in general, and I compare it to football, even, like, they're for sure the athletic capabilities of the riders themselves, it's so different. Your bodies are built so differently. But there's that people who are really like clicked on in their mind, really plugged in and doing it the right way, where you're really leading with your heart, which ideally, if you're working with animals, that's what you're doing. I think there's a huge beauty in that. So I enjoy that about
Yeah.
my work now, actually, like keeping that piece plugged in. And it's part of why I choose the athletes I choose.
Yeah. We're going to talk about your work shortly with 3XV Sports and the work you're doing with building representation for athletes that probably haven't had that representation historically in particularly high performance sport. But what I'm interested in as well is that for equestrian sports, certainly in Australia and probably in the US as well, is that you would probably associate it with a fairly white and wealthy and privileged culture and environment in a lot of respects. And in some ways that could be quite exclusive, right? Like, it costs a lot of money to maintain a horse and you need a place for that horse to be stabled. And there's a lot of costs with travel and competition and all those sorts of things. So it does, in a lot of ways, exclude a certain portion of the population from even getting started in it, let alone excelling in it like you've done. And I know you have talked about some of the barriers and challenges that you faced and observed in your sporting career and experience, particularly around things like representation and cultural understanding and those sorts of things. So I'm interested in what has been your experience and where do you see equestrian sports at today in that regard?
Where I see equestrian sports at today, I think the financial responsibility of it, I can't replicate my success for anyone else. The financial burden of it has moved it past being a sport that is for everybody. But still, I look back on my time with so much gratitude because, yeah, I think also a lot of gratitude for uh, the audacity I had to get myself there without the resources. That's maybe my like key word throughout life. I had a lot of that. Um, I think the biggest
So
thing I'm
honest.
seeing in equestrian sport at the moment is there's a big fallout with public rapport. There needs to be a big gap filled with animal welfare, and that's something that needs to be discussed. And so, you have I've met some fantastic riders across all walks of life from all countries, and so there is some diversity in that sense. But when it comes to finances, it's a sport that requires money. It's a sport that requires a lot of support. And that's why I say I can't replicate that success and like without taking away from the question, but it does segue into the next portion of 3XV. It's part of why I started 3XV was like I knew I can't replicate my success. I also can't continue this without support. And, I think like I have a better chance, not better chance, but I think I'm more fulfilling my purpose by helping others achieve their dreams. And I want to find a way to replicate my hard work and success and love of sport somehow for underrepresented people from wherever that may be. So yeah, I think I'm like getting a little bit off track, but that was the main point. It's in that sense, like there's so many pieces of it that I think it's going to forever stay in that elite space, but yeah.
The audacity. I love that. I love that use of the word for they who approached your career as well. Because for context, if you didn't pay attention in the intro, for our listeners, your background is Palestinian and Irish, and so I'm guessing that in the equestrian circles, there probably weren't many people like you competing, or is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think maybe across all my life, not a lot of people like me.
Yeah. So the audacity to push that boundary and find a place in a sport that's typically not, doesn't look like you is probably I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but was that challenging? Was that difficult? Was there a burden that came with that, knowing that you were pushing the envelope a little bit in that regard?
I never looked at it that way. Maybe now, yes, but
Mm.
I didn't have support. And I had this family that they were just like, why are you doing this? Please find another sport or find a better life. And so in that sense, there's, when you have people who are like not trying to hold you back, but they're holding you back because they don't recognize that. And this is something I actually talk about a lot with athletes in the region. Like, we have to build up a sports culture. Like, being a professional athlete is a career, especially if you have the right support system behind you. But I think not having that was the best thing for me because it made me just so, yeah, that audacity. Like, I would ask for opportunities. I had no problem to go up and ask for opportunities or to ask for sponsorships. So I have athletes now that I work with, or athletes who approach me now, who their records on paper, everything about them is 10 times the athlete I ever was, but they're afraid to ask for an opportunity, or they're afraid to, ask for a sponsorship. And I never had that fear. I just would do it. And I think that's something that really, like talent will get you far. Discipline will get you the farthest, but audacity will really get you into some rooms like that. That piece of it, I mean, that was how I made it in that sport also. That's how I got investors. That's how I got sponsorship. And I did back it up with a lot of hard work and really, proving my worth. But I never backed away from creating an opportunity in my mind and going after it. And I think that's something when we're looking at, now is the time with diversity and, if you're
Yeah.
from a different background, go for it. If you want to be in a predominantly like elite sport, find a way. I think anything is possible when we put our mind to it and we don't accept no from an answer, or we don't accept no as an answer. And also when we don't allow comfort of those around us to take
Yeah.
over. Our
Yeah.
family hold us back the most because they want what's best for us. So
They want to protect you, right?
yeah, and I try to do this with athletes I work with, that I won't hold them back and wanting to protect them and, like, being a mom in that way of wanting, the best for them. I can see where that takes over. I'll try really hard
Yeah.
to not hold someone back. I think another thing too is, like, to never tell someone they can't do it. I had so many people telling me I could never do it because of finances or even because of talent, whatever it was. And these are like core memories from being in sport as
Yeah.
a kid. And it shaped me in the best sort of way. But I'm also the type of personality that like takes that and uses it as fuel. And there are too many kids out there who might take it and be like, oh yeah, you know what, maybe they're right. And then they don't pursue it. And
Mm.
sport, health, moving our body is something that should be all what we all integrate into our lives because it's, I think, the core piece of like mental well-being, physical well-being, everyone. Yeah.
No, I couldn't agree more with that. And it just reminds me, most of my kind of career has been involved in Paralympic sport and creating pathways for people with disability to access sport. And so many times you hear from these elite para athletes that when they were kids, their doctors told them, oh, they're never going to walk, let alone run, or they're never going to be able to get a job, or they put on all these limiting kind of beliefs right from the outset at the point of either diagnosis or birth or whatever point it happens. And they go on and they defy that and they achieve great things anyway. And I can't help but wonder, imagine if that first line of advice from a medical professional for a young kid with a disability was the opposite of that. yes, you have some of these limitations and problems, but if you work hard and you find a way, you can achieve great things. And there's systems in place that can help you do that, whatever that might be. And how many more para athletes might we have if they were enabled and emboldened right from the outset, instead of given these limiting beliefs that may have prevented them from even trying, right? And so it's the same sort of thing. If we
1000%.
encourage people to be audacious and ask the hard questions and don't worry about other people's comfort, how many more amazing athletes might we have from other community groups that are currently not represented?
Power of the mind, and then it's also like we are the summation of those closest around us. So if they're also believing in us, I think that's the most important thing that we can give to someone, is our belief in them, and just also keeping ourselves accountable of our belief in ourselves. But I've seen far too many people who are so talented and they've lost belief in themselves, and oftentimes they're in the wrong environment and those around them are not believing in them. I've been in that situation also, where it's like I had the dream situation on the outside of having the investors and the team and, you know, all the pretty pieces of what would be my Olympic dream, but it was the wrong environment entirely. And it was like no sense of belief in me. And it starts to chip away at our mental well-being, and we stop believing in ourselves. We can have literally take away all the frills of everything. If you just believe in someone, then they will grow and they will be excellent. And this is what changes communities. So when we go into you know, any community that maybe doesn't have sport or like high level sport as the or sport pathways, I guess is the best way of saying it. But you have kids and those around them are really believing in them. They're going to find a way into those sport pathways.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about 3XV sports. So it sounds like you've transitioned your athletic experience and your desire to create more opportunities for other athletes to have the same sorts of experiences and opportunities as you did. Tell us about 3XV Sports. What is it and what does your services look like?
Yeah, so it's an athlete management and investment company. So I always say we work around sport, culture, capital. But the main concept and the start of it was athlete management, and that had everything falling underneath it. The reason for that was how it started was I was like, I don't want to be riding anymore. I'm not, uh, you know, my Olympic dream is no longer. I want to help
Okay.
others. I called one athlete and his coach and was like, "Hey, what do you think if I do this?" And then I had other athletes calling me. And so I was like, "Okay, I know I'm good at getting like brand partnerships. I can do PR, but the main concept behind it is like it needs to be quality over quantity. I don't want to see these
Okay.
influencer campaigns that are super disconnected from culture and from the athlete themselves and the audience they're building. I don't want to see these articles come out where it's like, just something that doesn't resonate with culture
Yeah.
and sport and who that person is. So the main piece of it, like I really am tailoring each thing to each athlete, but the main piece of what we do is like redefine sports narrative. So if I'm doing a project for a team, it's how we're creating that universe around that team. But like when I'm just looking at athletes themselves, it's how can I create something for you now so that we're creating something long term for you that moves into post retirement, and we're ideally moving into some type of business plan that will create some generational impact. So that meaning like, if they want to do something for the next generation, which all of them do, that's like our long-term vision and like the main piece of what I love to do. But the idea is like redefining narratives in the best possible way so that we can start to create change and create generational impact and generational wealth. That's like a very long-winded way of saying everything. But yeah, I think I'm very selective about the athletes I'll work with. That being said, I'll speak with anyone who needs help or needs advice because, I think it's the right thing to do. And I also don't only work with Arab athletes. I think that because of my background, people think I do, but I work with all athletes, all walks of life. If there's someone who I know that and we can get like a feeling. Okay, I think also having in sports so long and having worked with so many athletes at this point, I can get a general idea of, okay, is this the type of person that I would want the next generation to have on a pedestal, because I know that they're going to help the next generation. Like that's for me key. It's what are you doing on the
Yeah.
now or in your respective sport, because it's you want to be the absolute best athlete and performance wise, but you also are looking behind you and seeing who's coming up and seeing if you can create something for them. That's super important to me.
Yeah. I'm really intrigued in understanding, like, what's the real world impact of having that focus on athletes that want to tell stories and want to connect with community and want to drive culture change and things like that, as opposed to just an athlete who just wants a brand endorsement to fill their bank account and have an easy retirement. That's obviously a different type of conversation with your brand partners and with your athletes and those sorts of things. What's the impact of having that focus?
If an athlete has the long-term vision, ideally hopefully they do, it's that they're a brand themselves, and that's creating something for them. So without all of the colorful things on the outside of like how they're helping people, it's actually creating something long-term for them. It's long-term brand equity of who they are. That's amazing, right? It's not just, okay, I can maybe get paid 200 bucks or 5,000 for this like campaign. It's investing in themselves. But really what it is, creating a rapport with your fan base and changing culture. It's okay, when I look at Middle East, for example, it's actually creating a sports culture, and it's creating something for our next generation and creating something for this current guard of athletes, which is incredible. It's also like making sport the business it should be, like the right type of business. I get a little bit worried about the way that social media moves, the way AI moves. I think people are getting so caught up in like quantity over quality and like short attention spans. I want things that are really going to connect with people and better their minds and push forward our next generation and the generations to follow. Like it should be impactful. It should be, I don't have any problem with brand campaigns, even if they're short term, but it should be something that really makes sense and really connects with that athlete. So it's connecting to the fan base they're building and also connecting with the culture and building these cultural bridges. That's so important. The beauty about sport is it connects all of us. Like whether you're American or Palestinian or Australian or, wherever you're from, we know what football is, soccer is. We can see when someone is winning, when someone isn't. And there's just this like energy and this excitement of watching these guys at the height of their careers just give it their all on the pitch. I love that. It's connecting people. So I feel that we have a duty if we're doing any of these like brand campaigns and social media and anything like this, that it really needs to be building community and building something for the long term and not just like creating more flash that's feeding into like further bad negative mindsets that are like chipping away at people.
Yeah, and there's so much power in the representation, right? So obviously you said you don't work only with Arab athletes, but Arab athletes are a large number of your clients, as I understand it. But certainly a lot of your athletes are probably the type of athlete that has been less visible in the past and hasn't had the elevation and the opportunities, as you say, to get these types of brand endorsements and get these types of sponsorships and things so that they can pursue their careers, but also, as you say, create some kind of legacy out of it and impact the world around them in a positive way. So what types of athletes are you working with at the moment?
I've done some projects with Brazilian athletes and Portuguese athletes, like in the recent past. And at the moment, I'm
Mm.
pretty focused on my Arab athletes. So that's predominantly Palestinian athletes. I also have Jordanian and Lebanese. And I also, now that I'm back in the States for the time being, I'm looking at adding some select athletes here on the roster. And predominantly, they would be from Brazil and yeah, predominantly Brazil, but they're also based in States. So yeah, it's a mix. Again, I'm like mostly focused at who is looking to make an impact and who is really like understanding that it's the purpose is quality over quantity.
Is there a particular athlete that you think, I guess, you've had the most success with in terms of building that career and building that legacy and building that community and cultural connection that you can tell us about?
I think they all have something in common, which is they have an interesting aura about them. Like, it's like when they're in sport themselves, they're almost like it's turned on in such a different way. I think any professional athlete has that, but this is like what separates them from good to great. And then when you're around them, they're just like good people, like solid hearts. You can sense that. And not everyone is like that, whether athlete or not. So I think that goes for all of the athletes I work with. And I love that there's this sense of community impact. And I think anything we're doing in life, whether you're in sport or not, you should be moving towards your purpose. And you know, when you're moving towards your purpose, it feels right. And so I think that's
Yeah.
where I feel like, and purpose is, it's also like it's connected to us, but outside of us. So I think I sense that where there's this sense of like community around us and connecting to like the diversity piece, like especially with your work. It's oftentimes people coming from underrepresented communities. So they have this like deep desire to connect back to those communities. And there's something to be said for ideally they're all on billboards or covers of magazines at some point. So kids can look at that and see themselves
Yeah.
directly in that and look up to that.
Yeah. How do you sell that to a sponsor, a partner for a campaign? How do you sell that idea? Because if you don't see it and feel it yourself, I think it's hard to understand the value of something like that. It's easy to sell world champion, gold medalist, world record holder. It's easy to sell the sport performance factors of an athlete, I think. But how do you go about, driving value around that narrative of an athlete that is from an underrepresented background, has this different aura, cultural perspective? How do you sell that?
Think it's actually selling culture in a lot of ways and selling the potential community that's coming with that athlete. Because each athlete is incredible. What they're doing, anyone who is a high performance athlete is an incredible person. Like they're doing something that less than 1% of the world is doing. And meanwhile, you have these guys thinking still, they're like, I gotta be better, which is crazy because they're better than everyone I know. They're better than CEOs I know. They're incredible people, right? And so it's like I can sell that narrative of look at what they're doing 4 o'clock in the morning till 8 p.m., or look at all of the medals they're achieving, or, this and that. And it only goes so far. And I also don't like to, push this narrative of, oh, they're coming from this background or something. So I really like to lean in and, okay, there's the business side of it, like the analytics side of it. But I like to really be like, okay, if we're going to do it specifically a brand partnership, what is the meaning behind that? Look at the community that you're gaining from that. So if you're working with a specific brand, they're looking at doing a partnership that is, they want to, sell. So it's what community are you clicking with that athlete and that brand. So I try to focus on that, but I try also in the creative aspect of it that like anything we're doing is not very, it's like, you know, new aged. I don't know if that's the right way of saying it, but that the creative is done in a way where you're not just creating more consumers, you're actually really educating and inspiring and building bridges again.
Does that mean that there's a particular type of brand or a particular sector or market that tends to engage with your athletes more than others? And you don't have to name names or name brands, but because I just imagine that there would be some brands that would be very much for that, and there would be other brands that are just, no, we're just trying to generate more sales and we just want to focus on those metrics.
Yeah, it's not a specific like sector, it's more specific brands that I have to
Mhm.
speak with. Yeah. I've
Yeah.
had great success across sectors, I guess is the best way of saying it. Um,
Yeah.
but I think it's about who's behind the brand and who's leading the brand at that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a sport that I haven't really worked in, the commercial side and the sponsorship side and the brand side of things. Yeah, thanks for your insights on that side of things. I'm interested as well, given your Palestinian background, and I think it remiss of us to touch on the challenges and conflicts across the sort of Arab world, and in particular the Gaza and Palestinian situation at the moment. What power do you see sport playing in the world, which is increasingly complex? There's conflicts in various parts of the world, and yet we're right in the middle of the Winter Olympics now, right? And we still have these major sporting events and these, professional sporting competitions happening around the world with all of these amazing athletes from all corners of the world. What power do you see sport having in building social cohesion and connection? Because I think we need more of that in the world right now, particularly in the US, in the Middle East, even in Australia. Social cohesion is becoming more and more of a challenge, but sport seems to be a great leveler, continues to be a great leveler and an opportunity to address some of those issues and challenges. So I'm interested in your thoughts about the role of sport and your athletes in building social connection, social cohesion, and combating some of the negativity we see in the world at the moment.
I think it's that representation at that level. So for people from their communities to be able to see them at that level is inspiring. It ticks that box of inspiring, and it gives them hope. And then it also gives those who want to be in their shoes one day a direct line of sight of a pathway forward. And then when it comes to, and this is where I feel this is the most important piece for me, is the fact that people are seeing representation on the field of these other nations. And that piece is where you start to build cultural bridges and you start to see excellence on the pitch or wherever. And it starts to lower stereotypes. It starts to create these feelings of like, it's representation itself. That's what's really important. So if someone is, tends to be biased towards a specific nationality, they are going to have less bias over time when they see that person playing for their team and they're just excellent and they show up over and over again and they're just incredible. And that for me is where it's the biggest driving factor of like why we need to be doing this. It's not pushing out the inspirational piece just for our own communities. That's already coming. It's like, how can you, I've actually had a lot of people ask me to take on specific athletes because they're like great inspirational pieces or ambassadors of the country, but they're not excellent athletes. Like you need to be an excellent, incredible high performance athlete because that's when you actually start to create global change. And it's not just a regional inspirational beacon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the history of Paralympic sport is a great example of that shift away from just the inspiration, all of the barriers overcome. Despite that, they're able to be an athlete kind of narrative and shifting that towards the narrative of, well, look how amazing they are as an athlete. And by the way, this is going to help create greater opportunities for people like them because they're visible and they're performing well and they're being celebrated for their performance, not for the sort of backstory of overcoming a disability. And it would be, similar kind of shift, I guess, you're describing around. It's not just the overcoming growing up in a war-torn country or overcoming poverty or overcoming discrimination. It's actually, yes, that's part of their story, but they're amazing athletes. They have put in a lifetime of effort and they have immense skill. They're in that 1%. They're the best at what they do. And they want to create a better world off the back of that, or they want to achieve a certain outcome for their community, or they want to have their own life or influence in their own way. And that's the bridge. That's the story that you want to focus on. I think the more of that, the better. And I think those are the sorts of stories that people really resonate with more than anything, right?
I hope so. If you're with someone who disagrees with your opinion and you continue to just throw your opinion in their face, they're never going to agree with you. And so I feel like when people are so fixated on how he's an inspirational Palestinian athlete and bring up his backstory and just fixate on that, and the headlines only fixate on my athletes in that sense, and they don't look at the excellence on the pitch or whatever it is that they're doing, you're not actually softening those edges and making it so that people
Yes.
want to look at the human as a whole and start to create a cultural connection. Isn't even the thing, it's a bridge. There's no changing someone's opinion. I think that's the only way, is making it so someone looks at someone and sees with their own eyes, not seeing through your own eyes. And I think that's quite difficult to explain to people from our own cultures. Yeah, you can't
Yeah.
force yourself on everyone.
No, that's right. It's building that empathy, and it's human to human stuff. It's, I understand this person as a human now versus I understand this person as a representative of this other issue, this other story, or this nation, or this conflict, or this background. It's actually, no, this is a genuine, amazing human who has a whole range of things that are important and special about them. And by the way, they're the best at what they do in the world on the sporting field or in the sporting arena. And that's the power of the story, right? It's really cool. I have one broader question around representation. Is we've talked about the impacts and things like that, but in particular, like why can't these athletes that you're working with get this kind of representation and storytelling elsewhere? Are other businesses like yours simply not engaging in this way, or is there a shift in other athlete representation agencies towards this kind of storytelling, or do you feel like you're an outlier in the sector at all?
I'm 100% an outlier. So when I first started working with, no one had ever approached them before. And so they were like, yeah, like no one would ever bother to help us. And then now, even now, when other people approach them, there's a huge lack of understanding of still, what are we building long term? Like, what is the long-term brand equity of that athlete and the culture around them? And also globally, what are we doing here? I don't know that anyone is looking at things that way. And I hope that starts to change so that more athletes can get support in a way where it's like actually being impactful to communities and also to those athletes long term. I think there are a lot of really great agencies that are good at doing quick deals, and those deals are, are really helpful. But I don't know that I see anyone who's like really plugged into like, how are we creating a narrative or creating the narratives that are like really the essence of who this person is, the culture around them, the cultures that they're trying to also connect to, and creating opportunity from that is like not only here and now while they're still at the height of their career, but also like post-retirement.
Yeah. It seems like it's more of an approach of shaping the athlete to fit a brand or a campaign rather than putting the athlete at the center of the process and then finding brands that are going to align to the athlete. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, 100%. And, it's an industry. People have to make money. So there's also an aspect of it of, okay, there is a way to do things, and this is how we generate revenue. And I agree with that to an extent. I think also I'm working in a space or creating sort of a space that hasn't been created before also. So I'm just doing it in a unique way.
Yeah. Audaciously.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating. Like I said, what was that?
I was joking. I said to the horrors of everyone around me.
Good. That means you're doing something right.
Completely. If everyone agreed around me, then I would know I was doing something wrong.
That's right. You're not making change if people are going, what are you doing? That's really fascinating stuff. Like I said earlier, it's an area of the sport that I'm not highly engaged with, but I know that it's a really important part of the business of sport. And I'm really pleased that there's someone like you out there in the sector who's focusing on athletes first and looking to leverage the kind of empathetic and cultural sensitivities that surround unique athletes alongside their really excellent sporting performance and translating that into value over the long term, I think is I think it's probably unique in the sports sector as well. Congratulations for everything you've achieved and all the work that's to come, and also for your athletes. Now, what we usually do towards the end of our conversations on the Sport is for Everybody podcast is our quickfire questions. Are you ready to jump into some of those?
Yeah, I hope you add in like 20 of them.
I've got 5. And we do the same 5 for everybody so we can get a good sense of who people are and what they're into over the course of the episode. So I'm going to jump straight in with the first one. Who is your favorite athlete? Now, you might have to be diplomatic.
Not saying you have a favorite child. Like a favorite athlete of all time, Michael Jordan. I think he's incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Icon. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a good one. No one said Michael Jordan so far. Was basketball one of your sports?
No,
you played growing
although
up?
I've been speaking with a couple basketballers for the company, so to be determined. My sport, no, I don't have the hand-eye coordination.
Yeah, I didn't have the vertical height.
Yeah, I also don't have that, so.
Also, Michael Jordan, I love that. Next one, who's your favorite sports team?
The Oregon Ducks. American football.
American football. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I went to University of Oregon. I had the time of my life at their football games, I have to say. Yeah.
It is a massive cultural phenomenon, American football, college football in particular. It's probably on my bucket list to go and see a college football game. It hasn't happened, but yeah, we don't get it over here. We watch the Super Bowl once a year and we all wonder why they take so long to play a 60-minute game of sport. But
it's all the padding compared to the rugby.
Yeah, all the padding and the helmets and the blowing of the whistle and the stopping. And it's just, it's very different to the way we go about sport here.
Like a business side of everything, like I just see opportunity for branding everywhere.
Obviously, yeah. That's what it's all about. Here's one for you about you. What would you say is your greatest sporting achievement? And obviously you've had great success in dressage. Is there one particular achievement that you would rate above all else?
Getting to the Grand Prix and getting my gold medal. So to explain to people who don't know dressage, to get your gold medal in the States, you have to get a certain amount of scores at the Grand Prix to achieve your gold medal. And doing that was maybe the hardest thing I had ever done. It was my one and only horse that I had bought. And he was just not a horse meant for the Grand Prix. And it took me so long to get him there, but that relationship with him was incredible. And I remember working so hard, years to get there. And we were very successful at the St. George I-1, which was also international level, and so successful. And making that leap to Grand Prix was so hard for me mentally because I was winning everything. St. George I-1, made the leap to Grand Prix, and I was like, we suck. But like, I was so mentally locked on of like, I have got to do this. I want my gold medal. And I remember getting the scores and being like, oh my God, I'm so excited to get the certificate in the mail that says I have my gold medal. And then, they send you this like gold pin for your show coat, which I never ended up like getting. I got the certificate in the mail and I was like, I think I'm depressed. Like, I think that this is a letdown. And the reason for it was like, I had worked that was my goal for over 10 years. And it's not a sport that like you work a little bit towards. It's a lifelong sport. And I achieved that goal. I knew in order to get to the next level of my career, I had to sell that one and only horse. And I think my heart broke a little bit. And I think that was the moment where I should have been able to recognize, listen, I am not meant to be a pro in this sport because I don't have that mind to be like selling and buying horses and doing this, or to be work investor or something. Like, I was so attached to him and I reached that goal. And so then building a goal after that, like I could just never fully attain it because I was a little bit like, it's like athletes who go to the Olympics and they are depressed after. You work towards something and then you're like, what next? So yeah.
What, greatest, like the cliff, right?
It took me like a while to figure out what was going on.
Yeah. That's so interesting that you work so hard for something, you achieve it, and then you hit that what's next, Cliff, or what does it mean now? Because now I've done it, sort of thing. Is like a whole, the mental side of it is incredible. Thanks for sharing that. Last two, and this one, we learn a little bit about our guests with this one, but what's the first thing you do when you get up in the morning?
I drink water, I meditate, then I drink coffee, and then I go to the gym. I'm very routine oriented.
That's very healthy too.
I'm traveling at the moment, so I don't have like my full structure. So it's like that, but it's a little bit spread out, which makes me crazy. But
Yeah.
I really enjoy this to be my routine, and I really enjoy spending time at the gym. That has been my way of filling the void of no longer being,
Yeah. No, good. Good for you. It's putting me to shame, but that's all right. The last one, and this is probably the most important one. What is your best inclusion tip for our listeners? What advice do you have to create a more inclusive, diverse sporting environment?
never say no to other people and never say no to yourself. I think that oftentimes if you're walking into a place that feels like it's not going to fit, you're already saying no to yourself. And then if you see someone else coming in that doesn't fit, you're already saying no to them. There's I'll always say yes to the next opportunity is important, but I think it's always saying yes to yourself and feeling audacious enough to put yourself there in the first place.
I love that. That's great. Great advice for our listeners. Shayne, thank you for joining me today on the Sport is for Everybody podcast. Do you want to share with our listeners how they can get in touch with you or follow your work? What can we share with them so they can get in touch?
We have social, so it's at 3XV Sports, and then also our website is 3xvsports.com. And, all the contact info is on there, but I'm more than happy to speak with anyone. And I really appreciate your time and anyone who's listening's time. And I'm excited to have been here.
No worries. Thank you for that. We'll drop those links and socials in the show notes as we always do. And also for our listeners, whether you're watching on the YouTube or you're listening on your podcast of choice, make sure you head over to inclusivesportdesign.com for more resources that help you take action on inclusion. As usual, we'll have the transcript of the show in the show notes, and make sure you hit subscribe on whatever platform you're on so that you can get all of our future episodes. Also, listeners, if you could just give us a quick rating on whatever platform you're on as well, that helps us get out there in the algorithm. More people can listen to amazing people like Shayne so we can share their stories and elevate the sports sector for everybody. Shayne, Elise, thanks for making inclusion happen. Thanks for all of your amazing work and sharing it with us today. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you.